When I think of the Salem witch trials, the twisted 1690s version of the game show Survivor, I can't help but wonder, was everyone in that town on drugs? Turns out, they might have been. Scientists argue that the fungus which makes LSD grew on the town's supply of crops, causing the spasms and hallucinations that were blamed on witches. To me, the most bizarre part of all this is imagining all those townspeople being like, "Whoa, cool! Look at that weird puffy stuff growing on the barley. Maybe we should scrape it off. Or maybe it would taste great on avocado toast." I mean, fair. Still beats ye old bucket o' lard. So contrary to what we think, the people of Salem didn't accuse each other out of malice. Rather, they were just scared of what they didn't understand. And also high as kites. But frequently, we think everything a person does is a reflection of who they are, instead of taking into account situational factors. Thinking that the friend who didn't respond to your message is callous, when really, he might just be busy. Or maybe that inconsiderate doofus who cut you off in traffic is rushing to the hospital. We dismiss the effects of the situation, instead assuming that a person's actions directly stem from their convictions, their decisions, and their personality. Internal factors, rather than situational external ones. This belief is called the fundamental attribution error, because it makes the error of attributing people's actions to their fundamentals, their internal factors. The fundamental attribution error, or FAE, was first discovered by Duke University researchers who conducted a study in which participants listened to speeches about Fidel Castro. Listeners knew that speakers didn't get to choose their speeches. Nevertheless, they consistently believed that speakers agreed with what they were saying, attributing their actions to their opinions, rather than to random assignment of the different speeches. FAE happens even when we know better. But what if it's not just a misunderstanding of an opinion? What if we blame someone for doing the wrong thing when really they didn't have a choice? I'm not saying we should condone anything because of situational factors, but the majority of people who make mistakes might not be bad people. Rather, they could be in situations which force certain actions. In other words, harmful situations. My concern is that by ignoring external factors, we can ignore hardship and allow it to continue. So today, let's go on a witch hunt. First, we'll hallucinate the causes of FAE. Then, we'll blame the delusions on prudence. No one likes prudence. And lay out the ways it's ingrained in our society. Finally, we'll put some solutions on trial. People just don't hold grudges like they did in 1692. Nowadays, it's all, "You offered me ice cream knowing I'm on a keto diet. I guess I can't make it to your birthday." Back then, "You curdled my milk. I guess you can't make it to your birthday because you'll be dead by then. Payback's a witch." Harsh, but then it is a historical fact that Salem was full of Karens. To be fair though, FAE occurs for a good reason. Harvard researcher Joe Moran studied neurological processes during the fundamental attribution error and found that it occurs when we try to guess at people's motives. He explains that as social creatures, we're evolutionarily designed to be attuned to people's mental states. Consequently, we view actions in terms of their intentions. This happens even when actions aren't intended, but rather caused by external factors. At first gleam, it seems FAE is a small price to pay for getting to know what people think. But it has consequences. Remember the Fidel Castro study? Well, researchers from the University of Haifa found the same thing happens with actors. Just like study participants thought that anyone who read a pro-Castro speech actually was a Marxist, we think that actors mean everything they say and do in scripted TV shows. The issue becomes clear when we consider that actors who play despised roles, like Ollie in Game of Thrones, frequently receive death threats. The fundamental attribution error isn't just a fun psychological side effect. It's a problem. I think the people of Salem would have been a little bit more lenient if they realized how difficult it is for witches. They don't join satanic cults just for the hell of it. They make sacrifices. Broomstick riding sounds splinteringly painful. Not to mention all the health concerns of living in a structurally unsound and dangerously tempting candy house. When it comes to health, FAE is common in our explanations for diagnoses, whether they be mental or physical. Illness, like behavior, is seen as a consequence of people's decisions. The National Institute of Mental Health identifies the common misconception that depression is a sign of weakness, and those who suffer from it simply need to work harder to improve their attitude. That's right, we attribute depression to laziness. And it's the same story with physical ailments. MD PhD Richard Gunderman contests that we attribute all kinds of maladies to behaviors, like smoking or unhealthy diet. Yet these behaviors correlate strongly with demographic characteristics, like race or socioeconomic status, factors which patients can't control. Yet the fundamental attribution error would have us believe that illness is voluntary. FAE also plays into the COVID pandemic. According to the CDC, Black Americans are almost 4 times more likely than white Americans to be hospitalized from COVID. Yet instead of looking to documented discrimination and disparities in healthcare as the causes of this horrific divide, according to Professor Ibram Kendi, Americans blamed Black people themselves. Politicians, journalists, and doctors alike have succumbed to FAE, launching wild accusations that Black communities don't take COVID seriously enough. Yet the Pew Research Center found Black people twice as likely to view COVID as a major threat to their health. Blaming patients, especially Black patients, for their illnesses is not only factually wrong, it's morally wrong as well, because it puts the burden to get better on those patients. If the individual is the sole cause of that illness, and they can get better simply through changing their behavior, there's no need for substantial medical care. Ultimately, FAE disincentivizes providing support and hinders recovery. In the medical sector, we can't let the fundamental attribution error tell us that patients are solely responsible for their own suffering. Fun fact, one of the women accused of being a witch in Salem got off because she was expecting a baby. Although that's not what I'd think if someone told me that a witch had one in the oven. That poor kid though, he'll probably grow up eating eye of newt and toe of frog for lunch. Much like having a witch for a mother, FAE can ruin lives. Nowhere is this more evident than in our tendency to think domestic abuse victims choose to stay with their abusers. In her memoir, Whose Face is in the Mirror, Diane Schwartz describes how she stayed with her husband through years of beatings. FAE would have us condemn her right there. Yet in reality, Diane's husband threatened to kill her if she left. But always the most important reason she stayed was out of a fear of others' reactions if she came forward. Sometimes, domestic abuse victims' knowledge of the hardship they'll face when they speak out is enough to prevent them from doing so in the first place. In this way, the fundamental attribution error causes the very actions it later condemns. In Salem, witches had 2 main pieces of advice for each other. Never hex while flying, and always wear flame-retardant pajamas. When it comes to combating FAE though, there's really only one thing you need to remember to do. Research published by the University of Oxford found that when we make situational attributions, resisting FAE, brain activity indicates a conscious control over our thoughts. So all that's needed to stop yourself from committing FAE is a knowledge of what you're thinking and a willingness to change it. Mediator Dorit Price-Levine offers a concrete way of achieving this through the phrase, "They probably have a puking disease." This is a lighthearted way of reminding us people aren't always 100% in control of their actions. Instead of getting mad at a friend for flaking on a lunch date, think, maybe she threw up on the way there and had to cancel. In this way, we can give people the benefit of the doubt. Overall, the Salem witch trials were incredibly effective. I mean, when's the last time you've heard of a witch attack? I hope that someday FAE2 will become a thing of the past.